second. Closing argument from the state.
May it please the court, can I reserve 3 minutes or up to 3 minutes of my time for rebuttal?
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. Chris Hall thought he could do everything, and for a while, it looked like it could. He's a man who's brilliant, athletically gifted, popular. It looked like he had everything, and yet he needed something more. Chris found himself pushed to the limit in the middle of the senior year by a tough basketball schedule and an even tougher academic schedule, as well as competing in multiple curricular activities. And he still found himself in incredibly stiff competition with Taylor Jennings, who was a worthy opponent for the title of the valedictorian. Now, Chris tried coffee to keep himself awake, but that didn't work. He still fell asleep in the library after burning the candle at both ends. And not only that, he tried creatine in order to keep his body in line. Chris needed something more. And that is why we feel that the evidence shows that on February 28th, Chris turned to that something more in the form of methamphetamines, which he brought to school in his backpack. Now, in order to support this plaintiff has called 3 witnesses to the stand: Taylor Jennings, Kelly Norris, and Pat Down. From Miss Jennings, who is a woman of high moral standing, you've heard how she's a great student, and how she was concerned for the well-being of Chris, even though he was a competitor. You heard how she saw Chris in the middle of chemistry place something suspicious looking in her backpack, and how she then notified her principal, Kelly Norris. And that moves on to Miss Norris' testimony. Miss Norris, who is the well-respected principal of a central high school in Missouri, and who tries to maintain a tight ship through her zero-tolerance policy, was displeased by the assertion that one of her students might indeed be on illegal substances, and proceeded with the proper procedure to call Officer Pat Down to the scene to perform an investigation. Next, you heard from Officer Down herself, who is an experienced officer who has dealt with many such crimes in the past. And you heard that Officer Down investigated both students. In Taylor Jennings' backpack, he found nothing at all. In Chris Hall's backpack, he found methamphetamines, specifically 0.15 grams of methamphetamines, the knowing possession of which is a felony. These are the facts of the case, and the facts of the case are undisputed. Chris Hall had the motive, the means, and the opportunity, and he was caught red-handed with an illegal substance. Now, in order to try to dissuade you of this, the defense is positing a theory which is, frankly, absurd. The defense claims that it was indeed Taylor Jennings who planted these drugs in Chris Hall's backpack. And in order to support this, they have called 3 witnesses to the stand: Cody Grant, Lee Devaney, and Mr. Hall himself. However, as the examinations have shown, all of these witnesses are not particularly credible. So let's begin with Grant. First of all, as Mr. Peterson showed in his cross-examination of Grant, in order to see Taylor Jennings, and this is the one iota of evidence that the defense has provided to support their theory, in order to see Jennings place anything into the backpack, Grant would have had to have eyes in the back of her head, or she would have to have turned a total 180. And as Grant herself testified, the room was in chaos, so it was in no way meaningfully suspicious for Miss Jennings to leave her seat in the middle of the lab. Most compellingly, though, we've heard that Grant has lied for Chris before, lied about Chris Hall's ACT score in order to get a reaction out of Taylor Jennings. In other words, Grant's credibility is clearly relatively poor. Now, Grant has testified that he was friends with both Mr. Hall and Miss Jennings, but, as she herself admitted, she was better friends with Mr. Hall, and that is confirmed in her action of lying for Mr. Hall in order to get a reaction from Jennings. This clearly caused the credibility of Grant into consideration. So let's move on to Lee Devaney. Now, the one piece of meaningful testimony that the defense has extracted from Lee Devaney is that she did not indeed see any symptoms of methamphetamine usage in Chris Hall. But need I remind you that she did not see any meaningful symptoms of alcohol usage in the players 4 years ago who did indeed turn out to have been using alcohol, and whose use of alcohol resulted in the disciplinary letter being filed in Ms. Devaney's academic records. That clearly and pretty compellingly indicts Ms. Devaney's testimony. So finally, you have heard from Mr. Hall himself. You've heard how Mr. Hall truly pushed himself to the limit with a difficult basketball schedule, and how he was under an enormous amount of pressure to succeed. One of the effects of methamphetamines, unsurprisingly, is increased energy. And Chris Hall turned to get that energy from methamphetamines in order to keep himself going, in order to keep up with his rigorous basketball schedule and his difficult academics. These are the facts of the case. I urge a guilty verdict, not to hurt Mr. Hall, but to save Mr. Hall from himself, to save him from a path of self-destruction, which will lead him to more poor decisions in the future. That, ladies and gentlemen, and because all of the facts lie with the plaintiff, is why I urge a guilty verdict in today's trial. Thank you.